Good morning. My name is Sarah Fosholtz. I serve as the board administrator for the Texas State Board of Marriage and Family Therapists. Welcome to today's board meeting. I'd like to call the roll. Dr. Merchant.
Present.
Dr. Barty.
Present.
Dr. Elder.
Present.
Ms. Azell.
Present.
Mr. Parrish.
Present.
Ms. Reyna.
Here.
Ms. Richardson.
Present.
Ms. Smith is absent today, and that confirms a quorum, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Merchant.
Okay, so as we are calling the meeting to order, the first agenda item actually, since Ms. Smith has actually missed two, this will be her second meeting in a calendar year to miss. She needs to have, the absence needs to be excused. And so I would like for us to hold a vote about whether or not we will excuse Ms. Smith from the meeting today. Is there any discussion before we vote on this? Okay. Do we need to make a motion, Sarah or Patrick? Okay. Can I have is somebody willing to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we excuse.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor of excusing Ms. Smith from today's meeting, raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That passes unanimously. Okay, the second item on our agenda is actually public comment. So let me just, for the public, so you can know why this is here and how we are thinking about handling it today. So I guess somebody had brought to BHEC's attention that sometimes councils vote before the public really has a chance to share their opinions. And so one way to allow the public to be able to share their opinion before the council members actually vote on something is to allow public comment at the very beginning. And I think the board, we're actually in agreement that we think that's a fabulous idea. But also sometimes there's elements of rules that, there's discussions that have happened in committees that are not reflected like in the papers that y'all receive about rule changes. And so sometimes it might be actually helpful to for y'all to be able to hear our discussion of something before you weigh in with public comment. So I think we're just gonna kind of experiment today, I think is what we're going to do. And we're gonna just have different points in our meeting when we are going to open the floor for public comment. And we're just gonna see how it works and we'll just see what everybody likes. So I think I'm gonna go ahead right now and open the floor to public comment. I'm going to encourage y'all though to keep your public comments to maybe, should we do 2 minutes or 3 minutes? We'll do 3. Okay, we're gonna do public comment for 3 minutes. If anybody has public comment about any of the items on our agenda or anything else that's on your mind. And so let's just see how it goes.
So for public comment, if you're attending, first of all, is there anyone there physically with you, Dr. Merchant, in the meeting room?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. And then for those who are joining by computer, by Zoom, please use the raised hand feature. I'll ask you to unmute. And after all of the individuals have used the raised hand feature and been given an opportunity to speak, I will see if anyone is attending by telephone and allow them to give their public comment. Please note that public comment is not intended for a discussion or a question and answer session with the board. Additionally, when making public comment, please identify yourself and whether you are speaking individually or on behalf of an organization. So we will look at the attendees. I see one hand raised. Kathleen Mills, you have public comment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm Kathleen Mills, co-founder of the Association for Mental Health Professionals. My 3 points today are as follows. Number 1, BHEC administrative staff get an A+ for cleaning up the dishes left behind. Number two, the various boards and councils seem to be doing as much as they possibly can to add more regulations to the various rule books with little regard for following the existing subchapter B protocol. We're vastly regulated at all levels, including specialty certifications. For an LMFT, you, the board, have arbitrarily decided what 43% of the CE hours should be, even if those requirements do not apply to all licensees. For your supervisors, that number skyrockets to 63%. Your most recent addition of the requirements, 1 hour of crisis management and 2 hours of telehealth, is your most recent example of an unnecessarily rule proposal that A, failed to follow subchapter B protocol, B, used a handful of emotion-based reasons for justification, each of which were easily reasoned away, and C, was passed anyways despite all logical arguments and solutions. Currently, there are no 1 hour crisis management courses available. A counselor will have to take much more expensive 6-hour course with which the industry seems to believe is a minimum acceptable number of hours for competent crisis management education just to get that 1 hour you're requiring. Did you even consider the market availability of these courses you require before you pass these rules? HIPAA standards and compliance already have telehealth protocols for all counselors when doing their HIPAA compliance. Surely our licensees are putting their HIPAA compliance programs in place, right? Why do we need repeated regulation on this topic at both federal and board levels? We're looking forward to the quadrennial rule review to address this major concern of overregulation. Number three, you need to put the licensed professionals back in charge of their own CEs. From my experience attending board meetings, I don't see any, if much, consideration given to how much your new rules are going to cost a licensee to comply. Free CEs don't exist aren't the answer to the problem, nor is suggesting no one's keeping you from taking as many CEs as you want to. Well, my pocketbook is limiting that, thank you. Anyone running a business knows that business operation costs have gone through the roof in the past 3 years. We have demanding pay scales to address and compliance issues to perform, all rising in price. While dealing with the real inflation rate close to 18%, we don't need you to spend our already limited funds for us. Out of 286 complaints filed in the last 3 quarters, all but 82 were dismissed as not worthy of pursuit. There are currently approximately 4,676 Texas MFTs. Doing the simple math, that means only 80 out of 82% of the people who received a penalty of some kind, that came to 1.8% licensees. Where's the mandate for more regulations? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Is there any other public comment? Ms. Ray, you have public comment?
Can you hear me?
Just barely.
Your connection is inconsistent.
Can you try unmuting again?
Okay, how's that?
Better?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to put I want to put my vote in for more lenient supervision virtual requirements. Currently, I know we have a requirement for a certain number to be done by Zoom or in person, and phone doesn't count. But I've had supervisees who are in locations where they cannot get good signal. And I'm trying to accommodate people in remote regions who need supervision desperately. And it's been a real issue. So I would respectfully like the board to allow telephone supervision as more of an option. That's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Philip Crum, you have comment?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Philip Crum, co-founder of AMP, the Association for Mental Health Professionals. I'd like to comment on the already in progress quadrennial rules review required by the state. Now, I've reviewed the 12-month timeline put together by BX Robert Romig, who's in the room today, which he capably presented a month ago during a lunch hour Zoom meeting. I'm seeing a process largely designed to make sure that all rules and regulations comport with state law or don't conflict with each other and cause the BHEC staff any problems in executing their primary objectives. We would also like to see a very strong and purposeful secondary effort to ferret out unnecessary regulations and amend regulations that are not performing as intended, rules that don't serve any objective purpose in protecting Joe's citizen, rules that simply add to either the regulatory burden of licensees or act as distractions to the primary objectives of the BHEC administrative staff. Now, the licensees and public that are watching this 4-year self-review process, they know that the same boards that passed the regulations being reviewed are now being asked to publicly repeal or amend regulations which are either not popular or ineffective or both, and that may not be an easy task for some board members. Unfortunately, we've seen plenty of evidence in the past 18 months that public and licensee opinion seemingly matters very little to the current boards, all 4 of them. Now, this quadrennial exercise is a rare opportunity for each of the 4 boards to regain the trust of their licensees and strengthen the very weak bridges of communication that now exist. At AMP, we'll track the activity of this quadrennial effort and publicly report on the outcomes through our website and podcasts and hope for the best. And I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Is there any other public comment? I see no other hands raised. Oh. Jason Martin, you have public comment?
Hi, this is Jason Martin. I was a little late getting on the call, but I appreciate you taking my comment. I am currently the soon-to-be outgoing president of the Texas Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, and just wanted to take a minute to thank you all for your work on the board, and to just mention that we will be having our annual conference next week on April 11th, 12th, and 13th. And I know that some of the board members will be present and presenting at the conference, and we greatly appreciate that. I also want to just kind of express regarding some of the earlier comments about CEUs regarding telehealth, that TAMFT has regular CEU opportunities that are free for members, but also very inexpensive for non-members to get CEUs for a variety of subjects, including telehealth, supervision, and other such things. There will be some of those opportunities at the conference next week, but we also have monthly webinars that serve that purpose as well. And so if anyone is looking for those opportunities, these are, like I said, free. The webinars are typically free for members, and non-members can attend for $30 each. So, and that can vary sometimes, but that's the typical rate. So just wanted to throw that out there. Again, I appreciate the board's service to the MFT field. This has been, I've been very proud of our board, especially relative to other boards that I've heard in other states and in other jurisdictions and other fields, and how sometimes that can be difficult. But I've appreciated the work that you all have done, the mindfulness and intentionality that you've carried with your jobs. It's not easy and it's not perfect, but I acknowledge the service that you provide to the public and to MFTs in the state. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. So thank you for your public comment. We have one more, Diane Smedley.
Everyone, my name is Dr. Diane Smedley, and I just wanted to take a second and echo what Jason stated, which is that I appreciate the work that the board puts in, the volunteer work that you all put in to protect the public and to work with MFTs, make sure that we provide, the best service out there that we can. As we approach the 4-year rule review, I just, again, want to encourage that we don't forsake quality for efficiency or anything like that. And so again, I just appreciate your time. I appreciate the services that you provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Medley. I see no other hands raised for public comment. I don't see anyone attending by telephone. So I thank those of you who have provided public comment. I'm going to try to remove your little black boxes from the screen so that the board members can be better viewed. I've not done that before, so if I accidentally kick you out of the meeting, I profusely apologize. Please do log back in. It's my intent to simply just remove the screen. I think that worked. Okay, thank you for bearing with me as I learn the equipment.
Thank you, Sarah. Speaking of the four-year rule review, I will just invite any public that is listening. There is a way through our website to leave public comment. There's also a way through our website if you have a rule suggestion. So if there is a rule in particular that you want us to pay particular attention to as we are doing the four-year rule review, you can actually do that through the website. You can even make suggestions of how you would like the rule to be different. And we will happily consider it. So. Okay, let me move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of minutes from the January 26th meeting. Is there any discussion of the January 26th meeting minutes?
They were very detailed and an excellent review. Thank you for your hard work on those, Mrs. Fassels.
Okay, then may I have a motion that we accept the minutes?
Motion.
And Dr. Bartis seconds. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as written, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, there are no agenda item, or there's nothing to discuss for agenda items. There's no report for agenda items number 4 through 8. So I am just
Wait, 4 through 7.
I'm sorry, 4 through 7. 4 through 7. So I'm going to skip through those and just go down to agenda item number 8, which was report of cases dismissed by the council's executive director. Is there any discussion on agenda item number 8? Dr. Elder?
Can you clarify what the last one says? Classification was an unlicensed person and the reason for dismissal was corrective action taken. I don't know what that term means. Would somebody clarify?
Patrick?
I don't know the specific facts of this particular case, but likely what that means is there was an allegation that the person was either advertising as a licensee or providing some sort of licensed service. And when the agency reached out, the person took action to correct any overstep or, the misrepresentation or whatever they might have been doing so that they're no longer, violating the occupations code.
And in that case, if they change it very quickly, we don't follow through with a complaint. We just say, okay, you fixed it. Is that what that means?
One of the main goals we look for, the first thing we look for is if there's something like this, like they're baking it, they're advertising and they're overstepping, we want to fix it. We want to correct it and we want them to stop doing it. If it's very severe, we could take further action. And so my guess is in this instance, it was more of a minor as opposed to a blatant, misrepresentation that they're a licensed marriage and family therapist providing marriage and family therapy without a license. In that instance, I mean, that could be that's technically a criminal act under Chapter 502. And so we could go further with it, but I don't know, again, I don't know the specifics of this case. Likely it was some sort of, they weren't fully crossing the line, but walking on the line, and we asked them to fix it and they did. And so that's probably why we fixed the problem. Let's move forward.
I wonder if it could also be something like advertising themselves as an LMFTA as opposed to an LMFT associate, or not including their supervisor, you know, like something that would be just a really easy fix.
So if they're classified as an unlicensed person, then
Oh.
then it wouldn't be an LMFTA or an LMFT or whatever. It would be
Oh,
somebody
never
who
mind.
has, no license at all. So it would be
Okay.
somebody yeah, with no license, or I don't know, maybe a student. I don't know that, I'm not really
Yeah.
sure, but yeah, they wouldn't be licensed by us.
Okay,
So
sorry.
if they're unlicensed, it's non-jurisdictional, but what they're saying is when the board reached out because there was a complaint against them, they fixed it. So we couldn't have sanctioned them anyway, but we're glad it's fixed.
It's potentially jurisdictional because if they are in fact providing marriage and family therapy services or representing themselves as a licensed marriage and family therapist when they aren't supposed to be doing that, then that is a jurisdictional issue. The non-jurisdictional would be it's different. We would take a different sort of action. Like, for example, if it's a criminal act and they were been doing this for years, the agency wouldn't necessarily prosecute them criminally. We wouldn't go and file criminal charges against them, but we would coordinate with the appropriate district attorney's office to prosecute that particular person. So when you say non-jurisdictional, I think you mean like we wouldn't file the criminal charges and prosecute the criminal case. We would
Right.
coordinate with the appropriate agency that would then do that.
Thank you. That helps me understand. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Any other questions about agenda item number 8 or discussion? Okay, then can we make a motion to accept this report? Do we have to make a motion to accept the report?
It's not necessary.
Okay, then we will move on to agenda item number 9. Report of quarterly enforcement case activities. Any discussion on agenda item number 9? I will just say then, like, kudos to y'all for continuing to do excellent work in terms of processing cases, closing cases, getting cases to ISCs. Like, seriously, y'all are doing excellent work. So thank you so much for just being able to speed up that process. Okay, then we are going to move on to then agenda item number 10, report from committee chairs. So up first is our ethics committee report from Dr. Elder.
Okay, so the ethics committee, there were 2 events that occurred on behalf of the ethics committee since our last meeting in January. On February 1st, I was part of an informal settlement conference, and it was jointly done with me representing the MFT board, and then there were psychology board members because this person was duly licensed. And it was a fairly egregious violation, and both licenses were revoked. And then in March, the entire ethics committee met and we reviewed 4 agreed orders to go back and say, like, okay, as an ethics committee, how do we feel about the decisions that were made here? And 2 of them, the agreed order was warning letters, and 2 of them were dismissed because of insufficient evidence. And after great discussions, the committee members said, yes, we agree with the decisions that were made here. One of the things that came out of that, which I thought was helpful, is that, we as clinicians have a right to protect the confidentiality of our clients, and we have all kinds of rules that govern what we can or cannot disclose and under what circumstances. It came up like, how do we manage client confidentiality in an educational setting where you're giving case examples, maybe in a grad class or in a CE kind of situation, especially ethics CEs. It's very helpful to have case studies and how would you have handled this and what are the factors you would consider. And what we decided is that best practices in that instance is to absolutely de-identify the data. So you're not providing any identifying information about the person, plus to change things like sex, age, gender identity, all of those kind of identifying things. And then also to the best practices create an amalgamation of lots of different clients that help to illustrate the ethical point without using just one specific client, so that we're able to educate about making ethical decisions while also preserving client confidentiality. That was it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Elder. I'm giving the report for the Licensing Standards Committee. The Licensing Standards Committee has not met since our last meeting. I did approve 2 study plans. So just for those of you who are new to the board, whenever somebody has taken the exam more than, when they're applying to take the exam for the 4th time or more, they have to get a study plan approved by the board. And so I approved 2 of those study plans. And then agenda items 10C is report from the outreach committee chair. We did not meet also since the last board meeting. Sarah did provide a summary of our fall meeting. We had our lunch and learn, our town hall. And so are there any questions, comments, discussion? Yes, Dr. Elder.
So I know that this is, if I remember right, this was asked for at the last meeting, this report. And so thank you, Ms. Fasholtz, for this detailed report. It was really great to look back and have this data. Having looked at it, it looks to me like there was a dramatic difference at the December 2nd lunch event from the October and March attendance. And when I'm looking like, okay, what happened differently in those 3 instances? And the only thing I can identify is that in December, there was a blurb posted on the board news webpage, and there was an email update sent not only 1 month before, but also 2 weeks before. So it seemed like, from my perspective, the way that I interpret that data is that second reminder that came closer to the actual event boosted our attendance. And so I'm wondering about the possibility of including that second reminder email about 2 weeks out for future lunch and learns, so we can possibly increase our numbers.
I can put that in my notes, yes.
Anybody else? I mean, it doesn't have to be just because I said it. If other board members, okay.
Yeah,
No, I agree.
Dramatic
Go ahead.
difference in the attendance rate.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Ms. Fasholtz.
Also, one of the things that the outreach committee has been working on is like a page or a sheet that kind of explains the different mental health professions. I actually started working on that again. So I had reason to, for other things going on in my life, to actually start working on that again. So hopefully, maybe next meeting, we will actually have something for us to look at and make a decision about if that's something that we want to include on our webpage. So. Okay, agenda item 10C, report from the Professional Development Committee. Dr. Barty.
Okay, or that could be 10D if you want to. We could do C, D, whatever it takes. D, yes. We did not meet. However, we did make a couple of modifications to the jurisprudence exam that are listed regarding the number of hours, adjused the answers with some wording and things on the 801.142 on the supervision, changing that from the 500 to the 750, and then the definition, removing independent practice and replacing that with private practice, just to keep it clear all the way through. And that's pretty much where we are. We continue to get really good results or comments from our stakeholders on taking the exam and how beneficial it is. And it was encouraging to me to hear that there has been fewer negative comments about how heck heavy the questions are and how beneficial a little bit more of the clinically based questions are being. And, between the, I really like this question to I like this question, when you take those top 2, they're consistently, significantly higher than any that might be more negative. So I think it's continuing to evolve in a very healthy, positive way, and we will continue to try to honor that track record. And
I agree, Russ. I was really impressed with the comments for the jurisprudence exam. I don't know. I was also struck by how positive they were and kind of the lack of the ones we've seen before. So anyway, so kudos to you guys for just improving the exam the way that you have.
Agreed.
Okay, any further discussion about agenda item 10D? Okay, then we will move on to 10E, which is a report from the Rules Committee Chair. The Rules Committee actually met twice, and we discussed all the rules that we are about to move into with agenda item 11. The Rules Committee also has begun the 4-year rule review. So right now, currently what we are doing, kind of here's how the process has started so far. Robert and Patrick and the other BHEC members have already started to kind of go through our rules and find places where there's maybe where maybe our rules are maybe out of sync with some of the statutes, and just they've been kind of noticing some problematic areas. And so the Rules Committee has taken up already looking at some of those, as you're going to see in agenda item 11. The next step after this is for the Rules Committee members to go through the rules one by one and to make comments, again, looking for, is this best, is this really meeting minimum standards, or has the standards changed? And just really trying to make sure that we are protecting the public while not over-regulating as well. And so we are going to meet again in May, and we'll go through the rules one by one and see what kind of changes maybe we need to make. So again, anybody who's listening in the public, this would be a great opportunity between now and we meet in May. If you have particular rules you want us to pay attention to, now would be a great time to let us know. Even though this task has been assigned to the Rules Committee, I still invite every single one of our board members to also, you are welcome to review the rules yourself. And you're welcome to submit recommendations to the Rules Committee if there are rules that maybe you do want us to pay particular attention to. So I don't want you to feel like this is exclusive to just the Rules Committee. Like, you're all welcome to make suggestions. Is that okay? I'm not breaking any rules by saying that, am I, Patrick? Okay, just making sure.
No, but they just send it to Sarah, right?
Yeah, just send it to Sarah if you have recommendations of things you want us to pay particular attention to. Okay, so with that, we are going to move on to agenda item number 11, discussion and possible action concerning recommendations from all these different things. I will say that some of these recommendations actually have come from our town hall meetings because, despite assertions to the contrary, we really do pay attention to what our licensees and what the public, what's important to them. And so some of these rule changes have actually come because the public has reached out to us and said, we want this rule change, or our licensees have. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 11A. Basically, again, all these rules that we are looking at, the changes we are making are because of the 4-year rule review. And these are just different places where maybe our rules are not, I don't know the best way to say this, but they're not, hang on.
Supported by statute?
Say that again.
They're not supported by statute.
Yeah, they're not supported by statute, or, yeah, hold on a sec. Well, anyways, okay. So, hang on, now I've lost you guys. Where did y'all go? Come back. There y'all are. Okay. So the first rule that we're going to look at is 801.114, which is the academic course content. So again, this rule basically, hang on, I'm trying to find my notes. Okay, so historically, the way that this would work is like if somebody applied for an LMFT associate and they did not have either enough hours or enough like credit hours to fulfill the internship requirement. So maybe instead of like the requirement right now is they have 9 semester hours or 12 months. And so maybe they only have 11 months, or maybe they only have 7 credit hours or something, something off like that. Basically, this staff would add that extra time onto their associate license. So they would need to maybe get just additional hours as an associate, or additional time as an associate in order to make up for that deficit. However, like the statute again doesn't really allow for that. And so basically 801.114, we are going to modify. What we would like to do is modify that Do you have the rule? Sarah, can you pull the rule back up? I'm sorry. So essentially what this would do is it would allow somebody who has a deficit to apply for permission to remediate the deficiency. They would not we would not be able to issue them the license, but they would basically have a plan for, like we would tell them maybe what they needed to do in order to make up for that deficiency, like getting additional hours or doing additional time. I don't know. Patrick, you explain this.
It's
Thank you.
yeah, it's a concept that's borrowed from like psychology board, where an applicant comes in and they're very close, but what it does is, as long as there's nothing that would violate a particular statute or federal law, but it's basically what the rule requirement that currently is, it shows is if there's an issue with their internship, right, they're looking to try to move them towards licensure and remediate that deficiency. And so what this language is borrowed from psychology, where other people have had similar deficiencies where it's a rule requirement, it's not a statutory requirement. So it's impossible to craft a rule that would address every single type of deficiency. So what it does is it allows either an applications committee, or if the applications committee can't resolve it, then it can go to the full board, but they can craft a way for the person to fix whatever it is that they're missing. Sort of like what Dr. Merchant is saying, is they're 1 hour short. So what would the board say? Okay, we want you to go do, an extra coursework or whatever it might be that you think would be appropriate to remedy that one deficiency, and then meet the same standard. And so they can craft a remediation plan and say, go do this, come back to us, and then we can issue you the license. And so we looked at it, and we don't have to get rid of the concept completely. It's a different way of approaching the problem, I think.
What questions do y'all have about this?
I don't have a
Okay.
question. I just like to say that I appreciate the flexibility it provides the board. It doesn't say specifically, if this is the deficit, this is how we fix it. I think it gives us as a board a greater breadth of opportunity to offer grace to applicants who are just trying in good faith to become a licensee. So I think it helps us to support them in that way.
Is it sort of,
I'm sorry, Elvira?
no, I was just wondering, is it sort of like an assignment, so, sort of like to address that particular situation for that licensee? Like an assignment from the board to help them complete their hours?
Yeah, basically it would be us telling them what they need to do in order to remedy that deficiency, which would probably be something along the lines of going and getting more hours or re-enrolling in an internship course or something along those lines to be able to make up for the deficiency in months or credit hours. Dr. Richards or Mrs. Richardson?
My question was, since I'm new here, what have we been doing previously? Up to now, what have we been doing?
I will let Sarah answer that question. I will say that we've used, well, anyways, I'll let Sarah answer.
And under the current rule, it allowed staff to issue the associate license, but require the associate to do more than, for example, 3,000 hours in 24 months. So for example, if they, as Dr. Merchant mentioned, if they had only 11 months in their graduate practicum or internship courses of experience, when they have their associate license, they would have to do 24 months to qualify for the independent MFT license, plus another month to make up for the academic deficiency. So in total, they'd have to do 25 months. And with the current rule, staff was able to just process that application without having the licensing committee or the board get involved.
And this rule requires that the board gets involved. Is that right?
This is a little bit more of a on a case-by-case basis and is in better harmony with the statute.
Got it. Thank you.
Sarah, we actually did look at the data of how often we've had to use this, the current rule. And I think there were 5 instances in the last 12 months where we have issued a license and then just required them to do additional time or additional hours as a part of their associate. I mean, I do have concerns. I do think that it will be difficult for people to, because essentially really the only way to get more time in an internship is to enroll in another internship, which is going to cost our licensees time and money. So I do worry about that, to be quite frank.
I have the same concern, but my understanding of it is because of the way that the statute is worded, our hands are tied on this and we can no longer offer the exceptions we used to. So just for the public listening, this is not the board trying to make it more difficult or adding more obstacles. This is us doing what's in statute. So the proper channel, if anyone's unhappy with this decision, would be to go to your professional association to advocate for change in the statute, because it's not something we can control.
Right. Okay. Any further discussion about agenda item 11A, or is there a motion on the floor? Or would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. We accept the changes as requested.
Second.
Okay. I see Nicole seconded. All those in favor of approving agenda item 11A, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous.
Lisa, I have a question real quick, Dr. Merchant.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for these 3 rules we're considering under item 11, what happens from here? Like if we as a board say stamp of approval on this rule, where does it go from here? Up to BHEC for consideration?
Yeah, it'll follow the same rule
Okay.
process. So it'll go to BHEC. BHEC will then approve it. It'll go to public comment. After it goes to public comment, and I would encourage, again, if any of the public is listening to this or any of our licensees are listening to this and you're not happy with this rule change, then make public comment. And then after the public comment, it'll come back to the board. We will consider the public comment again. And then if we don't make any changes, it'll go back to BHEC, and then BHEC will approve it, and then it'll get published in the Texas Registrar and it'll be official. So. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 11B, academic requirements and supervised clinical internship equivalency for applicants currently licensed as an LFT in another jurisdiction. Again, this is another rule that just does not seem to be entirely consistent with the statute. And so we are going to also make a change here. So basically what happens currently is that if an LMFT moves to Texas and they are licensed in another jurisdiction, if they have been licensed in that jurisdiction for more than 2 years, then we consider the academic requirements and supervised clinical internship requirements met. Again, this statute does not, our statute does not necessarily allow for this. And so consequently, as a part of the 4-year rule review, we need to repeal this. Questions, discussion? Dr. Elder?
Record is saying, I'm deeply concerned about how this adversely impacts reciprocity. And in a moment in time where the LPCs, and SIPACT is already in place, everybody's moving toward greater reciprocity. This hurts the MFT profession. And sure. I'm not in favor of this, although I understand it's a required change. And I would, I do have to say, I'm heartened by the fact that we're offering a temporary license later on. I know that comes up in the rules. I see that as kind of a Band-Aid. If we're taking this away, we can offer that kind of instead. It's another way to offer sort of reciprocity with other states, but it's hurting my soul to pass this rule.
Dr. Barchi.
Is this we need to take this step and then make a corrective step over time to kind of move it then into moving toward reciprocity, but in order to get there, we've got to take a little bit of a zigzag route.
No, we can't fix this until our statute changes.
Well, that's what I mean,
Yeah.
is that why we would accept this? Because that would then position us to be able to take this and then move in the future.
I mean, the
toward-
only way we can move back towards reciprocity in the future is if our statute changes. So
Right.
yes. Yeah. So I guess I don't feel like it's a zigzag. To me, it feels like a white flag or rolling over or doing something that we don't really want to do. But we don't really have much of a choice because of our statute. And so we need a statute change in order to be able to get back to a place of reciprocity. And so,
And-
go ahead.
And all I was wondering is, are we gonna need to, is this the corrective action we need to, that's gonna clean us up? So that when it comes time to address changing the statute, we're in a cleaner position? Because right now it's kind of muddy.
I mean, I guess, again, I don't know if that's necessarily the analogy I would use. Robert,
okay.
did you want to say something about that? Is your hand raised?
Yes, sorry if you don't mind, I'll sort of be prefacing. Excuse me, we'll talk in a little bit about the rule review, the whole process, but just to hopefully allay some of your concerns, we have already identified, not just in y'all statute, but all the board statute, that the language surrounding out-of-state applicants, it doesn't really align with statute. What statute envisioned back when it was written was that the boards would be allowed to, the power they would have is to waive the examination for out-of-state applicants. But that was back when each board wrote its own exam and gave its own exam. And so that was a meaningful waiver. That was a, if you're coming from another state, we won't make you take the Texas exam. But that language is outdated and not modern because, as you know, everyone takes the national exams. But what we are going to try to do once we've cleaned up so the current rules are in line with statute is, as a broader topic, sort of like what we talked about with the other rule just now, is making it clear that where the board has the authority to set standards, it then has the authority to grant exemptions from the standards or to recognize reciprocity from the standards it sets. And so we very much will want to go further than this change to as far as we can under the statute to make it clear that where, for example, you as a board are setting qualitative standards about what courses are required or what the experience that is required looks like, you may then find equivalency for those standards. And so it won't fully reach what this rule had been, but I did want to say we will be bringing to you the topic to try to get you as much flexibility as possible under the statute.
Nicole?
Robert, I'm sorry. Are you suggesting that we're going to repeal this rule, but there's an opportunity for us to add another rule that could open a door for reciprocity? And then kind of leave it within our judgment? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
So I think when I
More like-
referenced, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, more like we're having to close this door, but we're hoping that we can slide open one of those little rolly windows off to the side that at least cracks the window and lets some air in. I don't know that it's going to be as satisfying as full reciprocity, but we're going to find as many of those avenues and exceptions as we can. That'll just take a little bit longer of a process. And it'll be with y'all. We will be sitting down and trying to figure out with you helping us along the way.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I have another dumb question. I realize that that this rule is out of line with what we're allowed to do outside of the statute. But what happens if we refuse to repeal it?
So unfortunately, because of the 4-year rule review statute, the council itself by October it will have to be certifying that all the rules that it's continuing to adopt are in line with statute. And so
It's doable.
I'm not sure exactly legally what that game of chicken might lead to, but I strongly encourage you not to go down that path.
Understood.
And I
And
know
the- And the other boards are having to do this as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they are going to have to, and we'll be presenting this. I will tout Dr. Merchant, at the rule committee, we talked about, well, you can simply defer and wait, and we'll just clean all of this up at the council level, and it'll get repealed anyway. And Dr. Merchant said, UMFTs do not just sit by the sideline. You'd rather lead if that's what's required. So
Okay, thank
you're
you.
being proactive.
And Nicole, I will say that is absolutely not a dumb question, because that was my very first question as well, was what happens if we just refuse? Anyways, so, anywho, okay, so any other, well, I just do want to say one thing again. This is mostly again for maybe it's for all y'all's education too, but also for anybody who's tuning in. What this means is that if somebody has been licensed in another jurisdiction, I don't know, for 20 years, and maybe they come from a state that doesn't require relational hours, or maybe they come from a state that only required, 1,000 hours. That means that they would have to go back under supervision in order to get those experience requirements, in order to meet those experience requirements. Sarah, am I saying that incorrectly? Is that not correct? Sarah, go for it.
No, I'm not trying to correct you. I just wanted to point out, when we did our little survey of the last 18 months, there was one out-of-state applicant that I could find that we licensed under this rule that we're now trying to repeal, sorry. And there is still a process in place for appealing a deficiency in 882 of the council's rules. So it doesn't mean that the door is completely closed to an applicant. It's just not as swiftly and as easily done by staff, because they can no longer rely on the 115 rule.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you very much. And it's actually harkening. It's good for me to know that in 18 months, we've only had to use this rule once. Like, that to me is, I don't know. But again, if this rule goes away, do you think we'd have to use it more often? Or especially the endorsement one in 801.142? Okay. Well, anyways, we'll get there.
It's hard to speculate what happens if the wheel is removed, because we've been relying on it for a while.
I would assume then, especially whenever 801.142 also changes, that essentially if somebody applies from out of state, you're going to have to verify, like if they didn't go to a QAMT accredited program, you're going to have to verify their academic requirements. You're going to have to verify their how many hours, how many credit hours of internship they had. And then you're going to have to also look at how many hours of supervised clinical practice they had. And whereas you've not had to do that, you've been able to just go, you've been licensed for 2 years in this jurisdiction and
Right.
just issue the license. And now we're going to have to actually look and see how many hours of supervision they received, how many hours of, how many client contact hours they did. And lots of states don't require indirect hours. So what are we going to do with that? Like, if a state doesn't require indirect hours, I don't know. It just seems like it's going to take a lot more work for the board to even be able to issue a license. I
You've
don't
been
know.
licensed for 15 years in another jurisdiction. Who's to say you still have that data?
Yeah. So, anywho, okay. Back to 801.115. Is there any further discussion, or is there a motion to make these corrections?
I refuse to make this motion.
I know.
She stole my move.
I will make the motion that we accept.
Thank you, Russ. Daniel, seconds. All those in favor of the changes to 801.115, raise your hand.
Your hand,
Okay.
Dr. Elder. Your hand, not your finger.
Okay. All those not in favor of repealing 108.115, that's one. Anybody abstaining? Okay, motion passes. I appreciate your negative vote though, Nicole, so.
I feel like one of us should, right?
Yeah,
Just
no
throw it down.
kidding. Symbolically, somebody needs
Yes.
to. I agree. Okay. Okay, now we're going to move on to 801.142. There's actually, I think, 3 or 4 different places in this rule that we are changing. So we're going to kind of go through them one at a time. Sarah, can you pull that up? Okay. Okay, so the first rule is 801.142.1. Basically, this whole section right here, honestly, is really just about cleaning this up, so that we're taking things that are written down here and we're just putting them into that top part. So this part is really just about cleaning up the language. There's not really a change. The 200 hours, like they're moving that later on into the rule. So any questions about this part? Okay, is there any discussion, or does somebody want to make a motion? For just 801.142.1?
I make a motion that we approve those changes.
Okay, Nicole or Barbie, one of them seconded. Okay, all those in favor of the changes to 801.1421? Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, then I think next is 801.1423. Sarah, can you pull that back up? Okay. So again, the very first part you see, an LMFT associate must obtain 200 hours. That is just, again, taking what's already written in statute and taking what was written in the section above and just putting it right here. A is staying the same. B, supervision may be provided in person or by live video if the supervisor determines that in-person or live video supervision is not accessible by telephone. And so this actually goes back to what Ms. Ray was talking about. And this is actually one of the changes that came out of our town hall. Basically, this change would allow, the supervisor to determine whether or not telephone supervision is appropriate and to provide an unlimited number of telephone supervision if they feel like that's what's important. We talked about this both in the meeting last time and then the full board meeting in January. And then we also talked about it in the rules committee. And essentially the rules committee decided that we basically opted to trust supervisors, and that supervisors can make that determination about whether or not their supervisee needs whether or not telephone supervision will work. Was that the only thing? I'm sorry, Sarah, can you pull that roll back up again? I apologize.
I mean, the only thing I'd add to that, based on our discussion, we had an extensive discussion about this in the rules committee because we were concerned about removing the cap completely, just saying all supervision can be just by phone, because it removes the ability to visually assess the supervisee. And so I really appreciate the way that our attorneys have decided to word it, which is if you can do in-person or live video, that is the way that is our intent as a board for supervision to be done. If that is not possible, then telephone, unlimited telephone is acceptable. So we're saying we prefer it this way. This is best practice, but it's possible this way if you can't get it. So that's all I would add. Thank you, Lisa. Dr. Merchant.
The way it reads too is that it's at the supervisor's discretion.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then C is just, again, that's taking something that was written elsewhere in the rule and just bringing it up here just for kind of consistency's sake. So is there any further discussion about 801.1423? Russ?
Yeah, just one question. Sarah, could you put that back up one more time? I know, you're quick on the finger. That's really good. Okay, I've never thought of this, but the 200 hours that are required, we can carry over 100 from a graduate school program, right? What if and this is probably far-fetched, but what if that first sentence says an LMFT associate must obtain a minimum of 200 hours supervision by an LMFTS? What if the grad program is not an LMFTS that is providing supervision? Because if they can take 100 hours, it says it must obtain a minimum of 200 hours by an LMFTS. But in C, we're saying, but 100 hours from your grad program can be applied to that. What if 100 hours was not from an LMFTS, even though it met the criteria for supervision under the grad program? Is that
Patrick?
nitpicky? It just popped in my head.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Patrick?
Sarah, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down, sorry.
Come on, Sarah.
To 4C, that's where this language has basically been moved from. So it's trying to take a standard that's already in the rule. It's not trying to change necessarily. It's trying to just move that up and reorganize the rule. So that's where that's coming from. if that
Yeah,
helps answer your question.
and I'm not questioning the shifting. I'm all for that. I like all that. I'm just saying that if you're in a graduate program and your supervisor is not an LMFTS supervisor on campus, what if it's an LPC supervisor? What if it's an AAMFT approved supervisor, but not really an LMFT supervisor? Can they
Okay, so-
count 100 hours from that program? Or does that first sentence limit using
I would-
100 hours?
I would say no, because of the way our statute is written. A statute says in a manner acceptable to the council. And so that allows us to be able to do that. But I will let Sarah and Robert answer that question more fully if they would like.
Good.
I was just gonna mention that currently staff carries over the hours without regard to the supervisor that is employed by the school. Or the supervisor that is used by a site that's part of the school program. But I'll leave it to Mr. Romig or Attorney Hyde to interpret if the language in this rule still allows that. And I'll display it once more.
I think it does. I think the first sentence is setting the general standard for the 200 hours that it be under an LMFTS. But C as the exception is just saying graduate internship supervision hours. It just says as a category can count toward those 200. I don't think you would read the first sentence as setting a requirement on the graduate hours. And certainly, even if one could read it one way or the other, where you can read it two ways, the board gets to decide how you read that and what its intent is. So.
Yeah, and I know in practicality, we've done, Sarah, I approve of all that. I was just reading that and I went, wait a minute, what if you're in a grad school program and you don't have to have an LMFTS doing the supervision? And the word must is, there's no wiggle room with the word must. So I just thought I'd throw a monkey wrench into all this.
I will say, just again, for anybody who's listening, the 200-hour rule does come from statute. That is a requirement in our statute. However, if somebody is getting supervision for 1 hour a week, 200 hours would take you 4 years. And so one of the ways that the board has opted to provide relief from that rule or from that statute is to allow you to bring in 100 hours from your graduate internship program. So that 100 hours of supervision would only take you 2 years, which is how long you have to wait to get to become fully licensed anyways. So that way they're more in alignment. So, okay, any further discussion about 801.1423? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we approve 801.1423.
Okay, a second is from Daniel. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, I believe that is unanimous. Okay, will you pull up our statute again, or not our statute, our rule again, Sarah? Okay, so again, this is coming out of our rule review. 4 is that for an LMFT applicant who begins their graduate degree program used for their license application before September 1st, 2025, that they will still be able to bring in hours acquired in their program that are above and beyond the Texas minimums. Sarah, you can stop sharing now, I think. Honestly, this change also gives me a ton of heartburn. I do know that, you know, the minimum requirement in Texas is only 75 relational hours or 150 direct clinical hours that are required in your internship. And so the board has said that that is what is required for somebody then to be ready for licensed clinical supervised practice. And so, but our students, I mean, I don't know about your students, Russ, but I know that my students get way more than that. You know, my students sometimes get 600 or 700 hours. They will get, you know, sometimes 200 or 250 hours of relational. And so being able to bring in those extra hours has been a tremendous boon, I think, for associates trying to get licensed, because getting relational hours is very difficult. And so, however, again, because the rule review, we are required to make this change. But essentially just what this means is that licensees, associates will no longer be able to apply any of the hours. Or if they start a program after September 1st, 2025, they will no longer be allowed to apply any of the hours required in their graduate program towards their license. I personally expect that this will add at least 1 or 2 years to some applicants. Just this week, I had a supervisor reach out to me. They have a supervisee who lives in a rural community in West Texas. They have been licensed as an associate since 2018. And they hopefully will bring in about 200 hours from their graduate program, and yet they are still 80 hours short. And so if it's taken her this long to get, you know, 300 hours, you know, it's taken her 6 years to get 300 hours. I mean, like, I don't know. I just think about things like that and it gives me heartburn. But regardless, again, this is somewhat out of our hands. So any further questions or discussion about 801.1424? In that case, I will need a motion. Thank you for dying on. Thank you for taking this one, Russ.
I'll
So
take it.
Russ makes the motion. Daniel Parrish seconds the motion. I did see your hand raised, right, Daniel? Okay. All those in favor of making this change, please raise your hand. Was that, I think Elvira, did you raise your hand? Did I see you raise your hand? Okay. Well, then the motion passes. Okay. I think there's one more, right? Yep, the endorsement one. Okay, so this, again, we have used 801.1429 to be able to count the supervised clinical experience accrued for an out-of-state LMFT. Basically, again, if they've been licensed in another jurisdiction for 2 years, we consider the licensed supervised clinical practice met. But again, this is another rule that needs to be changed. So is there any discussion about this or questions?
I make a motion to accept.
Okay. Anybody would like to make a second? Daniel Parrish seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of making the changes to 801.1429, raise your hand. Okay, then the motion passes. Okay. Well, let's just keep moving on. We are now on to agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action regarding the jurisprudence exam. There was a report in there with the feedback from the jurisprudence exam. Again, we kind of talked about this earlier and just how tremendous that feedback is. Nicole, Barbie, Elvira, I wish y'all could have read some of our previous comments because then you would know exactly how wonderful these comments are. So, anyways, any further discussion about agenda item number 12, either A or B?
Just for the public record, I would like to highlight the comment that says, don't change this requirement for Texas licensure. We need it. That is from the public. So when we have requirements like the JP exam, it is supported by licensee feedback.
Yep. Okay. Any further discussion of agenda item number 12? Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item number 13, discussion of possible action regarding changes to the supervisory agreement form. Essentially, you know, BHEC, they are kind of over, like they're technically in charge or have authority over our forms. The form went up to BHEC. They requested that we make, so we suggested some changes to them. They said they kicked it back to us because they have a change that they would like to make and they just want our approval first. And so, Sarah, will you pull that up? So the change that they suggested, we had suggested that they add this bullet that's highlighted in yellow. And our wording just said, I understand that I may change to another supervisor by completing another supervisor agreement form with a new supervisor and filing a complaint against my and I may file a complaint against my supervisor. And BHEC requested that we add the if needed to make it to make sure that associates are aware that they don't have to file a complaint against their supervisor, but they can if they choose to, or if they feel like there's need to do so. I believe that was the only change suggested by BHEC. Were there others that I am missing, or is that it? Sarah?
There was some discussion about whether it should be two separate sentences. Because just because you're changing supervisors, it doesn't necessarily follow that a complaint is warranted.
Yeah.
And then they backed off because they, as the council, they didn't want to try to mandate what the change was. They just wanted to ask you to reword it perhaps so that it doesn't look like a complaint needs to be filed every time.
Yeah. I would be fine with
a change in supervisor is warranted.
I would be fine with it being two sentences, and maybe it would be better to just have a second sentence that says supervisees may file a complaint against their supervisor.
I like that better. Because you don't want to infer that they have to look for a reason to change the supervisor. And I'd go for two sentences.
Okay. Dr. Elder?
So I went back and listened to the BHEC discussion about this, and their concerns were that including wording about being able to file a complaint against supervisors might have a chilling effect on people's willingness to be a supervisor. And so I think they added the if needed to kind of soften that messaging and hopefully help, I guess, soften it a little. So I think if we change it, I understand I may change to another supervisor by completing another supervisor agreement form with a new supervisor, period. I would suggest that we leave it if needed. I may file a complaint, like leave the if needed in there, because that was, I think if we take that out, BHEC is going to kick it back down. That was their concern about it. So I'm fine with making it two sentences, just period, if needed.
So wait, are you saying that if we did two sentences, the second bullet would say, if needed, I may file a complaint against my supervisor?
Okay. I think two separate points to make them to not infer that they're connected. And yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That works. 2 bullets. And second bullet just says, if needed, I may file a complaint against my supervisor. I would also like to point out that this change came from, again, it came from licensees reaching out to the board and asking the board for this change. Okay. Any other discussion about agenda? Do we need to vote on that, or can we just agree to that, or how does that work?
I think we just make the change. I mean, it's just
Okay.
cosmetic, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't need to vote on, we don't need to vote on that, right?
I'll defer to Attorney Patrick. It has to, it has to go back to the council now?
I don't remember exactly the council's motion or order, but I don't know that it just general consent, I think, is sufficient, right, Robert? I don't know that this needs a formal motion and so, yeah, I think you're fine.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
unless you chose to adopt a specific rule about what forms you use. Generally, any kinds of forms, it's really up to staff and the executive director to just create and manage those. And so I think even the bringing it to BHEC for a discussion was discretionary to just make sure everybody was having the opportunity to discuss. You don't need any formal votes on this sort of
okay,
thing.
cool. Okay. Well, I do think that there is general consent. So
So to confirm, this is my understanding of how you want the change.
I like it.
mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 14, report from the board chair. I actually really don't have much of a report. We are making progress on our rules review. And that's kind of the big task of the board currently is that. I am giving a presentation, Russ and I are giving a presentation at TAMFT next week. And so again, any members of any licensees that are listening, I would invite you to come out and listen to us. And we'll be discussing actually a lot of the things that we're discussing here today. Dr. Elder put in a request to speak at TCA. Where is TCA going to be this year?
Dallas. Whoa, whoa.
Yay! Okay, good. So Dr. Elder put in a request to speak at TCA.
I would ask, is there anyone who wants to join that presentation? Like when I submitted the program proposal, I just put my name because I wanted to make the deadline, but okay, Dr. Barti, anybody else want to participate? Okay, then Dr. Barti, I will change the submission to include you. Thank you. I think we make a great team.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm always a good support for stuff.
Tag team well. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually don't have anything else to say in my board report. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 15, report from the board's delegates. Who wants to take this conversation?
Wouldn't that be
Or
Mr.
we can-
Parrish? Because Ms. Smith isn't here.
Yes, and I was like saying, I was like, well, I didn't have a report to being my first board meeting. I don't know what to report. It was quite interesting, and it was an adjustment. I think the overall consensus that I would just have to report was just that they did like, I think Janine and I, the things that we had recommended from our board to BHEC, definitely was trying to make a good consensus between all the other boards that BHEC represents. So it was kind of a kudos to that, but it's just one of those, I think we're kind of paving the way. And I just think we should just continue to make our recommendations to BHEC as we have.
You have in your meeting materials a summary of the rulemaking that was done on February 20th. Adopted rules became effective on March 27th. Proposed rules, 2 of them. I
have a comment about A and B. I just want to say, again, want to point out some of the rules that have gone into effect. One is that it increases the the number of telehealth hours from 500 to 750. That is also a rule that we made, or that is another, we also made that change again, based on comments from licensees, concerns expressed by licensees. So there's that rule. There's also, let's see here, where is it? The supervisor requirements, removing the limit of 12 supervisees per supervisor. Again, that actually came out of some conversations at TAMFT last year with licensees. And then, anyway, so I just wanted to make sure to draw attention to those two particular rules. Also, do we know yet, it might be too early to know this, but the proposed rules that were approved by BHEC, so the supervisor requirements, the requirements for continuing education, and not the temporary license, because there's a note on that, but for the other two, do we know when those will go, when those will be open for public comment?
They'll be published in the April 12th Federal Texas Register.
Okay.
Is now an appropriate time to discuss one of the proposed rules, since it's here on this agenda item?
What do you mean by discuss it? Because I mean, we can't make changes to it. I don't,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
it's already gone through BHEC. BHEC has approved it. So now it's going to public comment. And then once
So
the public comment closes, it'll come back to us, and probably at the July meeting, I would think. We'd probably just be able to discuss it at the July meeting.
So if I had a problem with a part of one of the rules, I should submit public comment?
You can, or you can, or we'll discuss it at the meeting in July.
Okay, got it.
So
I'll wait.
Or send Sarah and I an email.
I'm on it. Okay.
Anticipation. Also, the council introduced renewal confirmation emails. This is one of the innovations that our staff member, that one of our staff members, Jennifer Nowak, was able to accomplish. So when you successfully renew your license, you will get a confirmation email. And that's operated through our database. So kudos to her for that. The customer service survey, that's hard to say, report is available for people to review. And Director Spinks explained at the February 20th meeting that many of these comments will be incorporated into the strategic, the next strategic plan. And Deputy Director Romig will be leading the strategic plan process. And he's also leading the quadrennial or 4-year rule review. And I'd like to give him a moment to discuss that with you.
Before Robert moves on to the 4-year rule review, are you going to talk about the workforce survey and the customer service survey? Are you talking about those also?
I don't
Or
have
you
any
just-
specific comments, but happy to answer questions, give a general, I can give a general statement about each and then see what questions folks have.
I guess I'll just ask my question, and then you can answer it or not, whatever you want to do. But I'm curious for the customer service survey. So like, one of the things that we have to do here at ACU is I have to poll my students and measure basically their satisfaction with different aspects of the program. And one of the things we have to do is we have to set a sufficiency level. So like 70% of students have to agree or strongly agree with a particular statement. And if they don't, if not 70% agrees or strongly agrees, then that would be considered insufficient. And then that would trigger the program to have to make changes to be able to try to increase that level of satisfaction. And so I'm curious if for our customer satisfaction survey, like, do we have like a level of, like, do we have a target that we're aiming for in terms of how satisfied we want people to be? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good question. I don't know that we have set a specific number. Based on looking at most agency customer survey results and other experiences, I'll say our general target is to be better than last year. I mean, that they're better than the last time. That's always a goal. And I think in the upper 80%, if you're in the 90% satisfied, that's excellent. and that is sort of the overall goal. And I think if you're in the 80s, that's a respectable place to be. But it's also a matter of looking at the very unsatisfied numbers as well. You know, you sort of give people the range of very satisfied to very unsatisfied. And so even if your overall weight is mostly in the satisfied to neutral category, if you have a significant more than 3%, more than 5% in the very unsatisfied, that's probably a red flag.
So have y'all already decided, I don't know if you have, this is my other question, have y'all already decided maybe changes that y'all are going to make based on the customer satisfaction survey?
No, no, still working on that. We are looking at changes to the workforce survey, but yeah, Sarah, maybe you know changes that have already happened that I don't.
The report that Director Spinks put out and is part of your packet includes, I'm trying to get the language up, includes that the analysis included areas to look at were telephone responses and ease of better usability of the website resources. So I know he's already looking into those kinds of things, and I can report that the board administrators and senior management met on an editorial board, if you will, for the website to look at ways that we can improve usability
cool.
for that.
Excellent.
So it's been received, it's been read through, and Director Spinks has already put some actions in motion.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. Dr. Elder?
So based on the customer service report, I love that those are the two main goals because those seem to be kind of the biggest glaring areas that needed to be addressed. One thing I was very, very excited to see was when they asked the question, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was which areas of the website do you access most frequently? And I loved that proposed rule changes was in there because we've only recently added that to the website, which to me means we've made it more easy, more accessible for our licensees to give us input, which is we want and are begging for that communication. Just for the public who's listening, is we really, really want public comment, written public comment about proposed rule changes. And so I'm glad to see that that was accessed very often. The one thing that I would ask that be considered moving forward is maybe kind of put a pin in this to focus on is those how-to guides had very low traffic. And I think my thought is if we can increase somehow use of those how-to guides, it would drastically decrease the emails and phone calls to staff, and therefore indirectly answering questions up front on the website, which we do. I just don't think people are using them. Maybe it's not as accessible as they'd like it to be. If we do that, I think it will inherently improve the phone customer service ability, the satisfaction there. So I would ask that somehow we get more traffic to those how-to user guides.
I still think we need to get Tim to record videos in his little dry humor.
Yeah, everything's adequate.
Everything's adequate. Then you click on the adequate link. I don't know. Anyways, he'd be just so good at that.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a
question.
I have another,
go ahead.
Yeah.
I have a different question. It's not about the customer service feedback. Is that okay?
Unless anybody else, does anybody else have a question about the customer service feedback, customer service? Okay, go for it, Jody.
Okay. So when I was surprised to see this email that says, hey, we're notifying you that you have successfully renewed your license, because my understanding of our stance, why we didn't send renewal verification, was because it took too much staff time. So I'm curious, is this an automated response that doesn't require staff time, Ms. Vasholz?
Yes, it is automated through the database. And that's what Ms. Nowak was able to configure.
Thank you. That makes me happy. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I had another question about I had a question now moving on from the workforce survey, or I'm sorry, moving to the workforce survey. Do y'all already have like changes to the questions in the works, or are y'all gonna leave it exactly the same?
No, we've already met twice to go through the questions, and based on the answers, try to incorporate better answer choices and better ways to make it more quantitatively accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to read through some of it, and like I mean, even like the question about like what states are you licensed in, and some people use abbreviations, some people use the full name, and so it just makes it hard to be able to like analyze that data. And so, giving them choices, or I don't know. What is y'all's
Yep,
plan?
for the states and counties, we're going to try to do drop-down menus.
Yeah. What about your plan for like, how do y'all have a plan for analyzing all the narrative data? I mean, there was just so much like one of the questions was, what are the things that you think we should do to reduce barriers to practice? And there was just, I mean, like 6,000 responses or something insane. Like, what's your plan for sorting through all that?
So on we kind of hurt ourselves in some way, because at the same time we did the workforce survey, we also did the strategic plan survey. And so we did have lots of narrative. On the workforce survey, we've really tried to focus in on the demographic information that was the purpose of that survey. And so I think we've quickly read through the narrative on that one. But we have tried to read the responses. On the strategic plan survey, we had, I think it was 9 open-ended questions and had about 700 responses for each of those. And I went through and coded all of the answers based on topics to generate numerical numbers for that. So yes, we read all the answers that people give us.
Yeah, I read through the first 600 answers of the workforce study, and then I was like, yeah, I probably have things I should be doing other than just reading all these comments. So anyways, okay, well, thank you very much. Are there any, this might be too soon to ask, but as far as the workforce study goes, are there any insights y'all have already gained so far that like y'all find really interesting, or that you will use to make changes, or just, are there any takeaways y'all come across so far with the workforce study?
Definitely, Sarah or Patrick may have had more conversations than I have coming in a little bit after the fact. I do know a couple of the standout things that Daryl, Director Spinks, has talked about. One is the reason people get into the profession. That one would sort of suspect this, but the answers bore out that there's a strong number of people that get into this profession to help others, and that was borne out by the numbers, and that was interesting. And then the one sort of concerning thing that we have put in our pocket, and we're trying to think about if there's a discussion to have with y'all as the boards, is concerns over supervisors. We ask questions about, are you a supervisor, or are you interested in being a supervisor? And if you're not interested in being a supervisor, why? And the liability concerns, people raised that a lot as a large concern for being a supervisor, which we thought is a very interesting, not illogical problem. And so I think that's something we've taken away that needs addressing. We're just not yet sure how to approach that. But Sarah, Patrick, were there any other high-level takeaways that we've been batting around?
That's all that I remember, and specifically that Director Sprinks brought that up about the liability for supervisors in discussion with the supervisory agreement form at the February 20th meeting. But I haven't had any other discussions with him about the workforce study itself.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions, Robert. I really appreciate it. Anybody else have any questions before we move on to the rule review from Hearing from Robert. Okay, then Robert, I'll turn it over to you about the rule review.
Excellent. Well, I think we've already mostly covered, but I just wanted to give each of you a general timeline of how we're rolling this out. There is the document in the folder. So I'll share my screen. Take a page out of Sarah's book. There is as Chair Emergent said, we as staff have already been working on this. We've been looking through all of the rules and sorry, hold on one moment. Sorry, my 9-year-old's homesick and was just about to make a whole lot of noise in the kitchen. We are going to present a list of all of the rules that we have identified as needing work in some way to the rules committees. And that's going to happen in May, June timeframe. I think we've already got a scheduled date in May. And what that conversation will be is really identifying what rules need to be on tap to get worked on, either because there are statutory problems or because we've identified a gap in regulation that needs fixing. Either it's too strict or too light, or that question that the public commenter raised about, is this a necessary regulation? But then I want to stress that we're going to bring that list to you as the board before working on any solutions. We are going to take a very long, drawn-out process to make sure this is very transparent and that the conversation about what we even should focus our time on happens before we start talking about solutions. And so we are not going to bring you any proposed rules at your June and July meetings. Instead, what we're going to be bringing you is sort of these initial findings of what we anticipate need to be worked on and what the rule committee has sort of said, yes, we think these are the priorities. And then to the public that's listening, and please, those of you that are with associations, tell your membership that when we're announcing all of this initial findings in June, we are then going to schedule town hall meetings in July and August. Every board will have a town hall where the public is invited to come and weigh in on the priorities you think we should be focusing on, and to give input on whether something ought to be worked on, or you think it's just fine and should be left alone. And only after that, when we get to the September and October board meetings, will we present sort of the first action item, which is really just approval of these are the findings from the rule review, the things that we think need repealing right away and will propose repealing, and the things that we think need work and need changes. And that's the moment where we'll bring the rule committee back in to start talking about actual solutions and changed language. And each of those will go through the same process that rule changes go through. They'll come before the board. They'll have to get proposed by the council. There will be public comment. So there will be lots of opportunity for both you as board members and the public to weigh in on what we should be giving our attention and what changes we should be making. Lastly, I'm going to scroll down just as a helpful guide at the bottom of this page. As you as the rule committee members are looking through all of the rules, this is you drew the short straw and have to look through all of the rules, but all the board members think about these questions. And if there are any rules that you think should be on our radar, please let us know of any of the ones that lack statutory authority, but also just you're going to know, has life changed? Has the way universities run their programs changed? Have practices in terms of supervision changed, so that we need to update and aren't left behind? And then 4 and 5 particularly are ones that y'all are going to know way more than staff. Are there any areas we're worried that we have put in too much restriction, too much regulation? and need to curb it back? And are there any areas that maybe there's some gaps and we need to more effectively regulate? Things like telehealth, where the rules don't contemplate and practices change and we need to make sure there are guidelines. Minimum necessary to protect the public, as the public commenter said, but just those are the two bookends that we're going to be keeping in mind. So that's my spiel. Again, we'll have more of a sort of presentation of our initial findings at the June meeting. But that's, if there are questions, I'm really happy to answer them.
Dr. Elder? You're muted.
Muted.
Thank you. Sorry. In a discussion earlier in this meeting, we talked about the fact that there are rules that are being repealed because they conflict with statute. And those have significantly impaired the reciprocity that Texas can offer to out-of-state licensees. And I think if I heard you right, one of the things you said is that's on our radar. We know that's a problem. And we're going to be looking at what we can do to offer those little windows, right? During the rule review process, is the focus on let's just get rid of what conflicts with it, get through the entire 4-year rule review, and then go back and see what we can do to add rules that open those windows? Or does the adding rules to open those windows happen during the rule review?
So I'd say mostly the first, just because repealing, this is a very complex process. And so identifying and repealing what must be repealed is easier than crafting and building new. But that's not to say it's entirely out of the realm of possibility that we will have some things that we can propose as amendments. It will just depend on how quickly we can get consensus if there's an obvious change or obvious rule to put into place. If the thing that we come up with to replace, for example, this reciprocity type rule, if all the boards agree and everyone likes the direction we're going and it's an easy solution, then wonderful. We will not wait artificially. We'll proceed with what we can as fast as we can. But we also want to make sure that everyone who needs to have a voice in the process of what that needs to look like gets that voice and gets that time, and we're not rushing it just to meet the rule review deadline.
What is the rule review deadline?
So when it is a traditional, there are not a lot of laws about the rule review, and unfortunately that makes it kind of hard. So our best understanding is that it takes the form of a notice published in the Texas Register, which is a traditional rule. You have 6 months to react to adopt or withdraw or not adopt. And so that's my best guess of the deadline to, once you've announced your rule review, react and say whether a rule is valid.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions for Robert? Okay, well, thank you, Robert, for being here, and thank you for that explanation. It was just perfect. Very, very well said. Thank you. Okay, let's move on then. Well, first, Russ, I want to be mindful of your time. Do you need to log off soon? Okay. Okay. Then let's move on to agenda item number 16, report from board administrator. That would be you, Sarah.
I wanted to point out the board members have in your packet materials the performance measures for the latest quarter. They'll be presented to the council when it next meets. So it's just there as a preview for you because it was available. Wanted to let people know about as Dr. Elder mentioned, from our webpage on the right-hand side, the quick links to use the how-to user guide. Also, each of the board member names in the masthead is a link to that board's landing page, and it's specific quick links. And it's often very helpful to visit our frequently asked questions webpage before you actually pick up the phone to call or to send an email. Staff wanted me to remind people that when you use the Contact Us webpage and use our Email Us web form, that there's a drop-down menu to select the programs. And some people are selecting the licensee self-report when they have a licensing question. And that licensee self-report is actually intended for when you need to report your own conviction of a criminal offense or a civil action or some other thing that's required by rules for the licensee to report. And it goes to our enforcement staff. So your licensing question is delayed while enforcement staff figures out what you're asking and then forwards it to the appropriate staff. So if you have a question about your application or about your MFT license, select the Marriage and Family Therapy program on the drop-down menu, and it'll be routed to the appropriate staff. As always, please remember to check your junk and spam folders when you're expecting correspondence from a government agency. Often the recipient's out of email application filters it into those junk and spam folders. And I wanted to remind you, let me get back here. Wanted to remind you about the proposed rules. If you go back here, if you go back to our, I'm not sure what I'm sharing, so let me start over. If you go back to the home page of our website, and on the right-hand side, the second bullet is proposed rule changes and rulemaking. So on April 12th, when the proposed rules are published, you can come here and we will have the February 20th regular meeting, a PDF posted here, and it'll show the April 12th edition listed under November 17th or under this column. You can click on the PDF then to make your public comment specific to the proposed rules that are available. And I think that's all that I wanted to mention in this report. Unless there's, consolidated rule books have just been posted. So if you have downloaded a consolidated rule book, they're now dated April 1st. For the rules that became effective March 27th. So if you've downloaded a rule book, please go ahead and download the new one and find that on our website on the statutes and rules page. And thank you to Ms. Skiff for updating those rule books in such a timely fashion. That concludes my report.
Okay. Any questions, Dr. Elder?
So I noticed in the second quarter performance measures, by the way, knocking it out of the ballpark. I mean, y'all are doing such an amazing job. A lot of them say we'll be able to continue this if we have the appropriate staffing levels. So could you speak to how many full-time positions do we have open and what's our status as far as fully staffed or understaffed?
I don't have specific information as to what vacancies are there right now. It's an ongoing concern for state agencies to keep staffed, especially when you have a downtown office and state employees may have an opportunity to move to a different agency that is officed closer to where they live. So that's one, I know that's one of our continuing challenges. I'm not aware at this time that we are in jeopardy of that, but it is an ongoing concern that Director Spinks is cognizant of.
Just buy a helicopter and chopper them to work. Land on the roof, hop out, you're good to go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Sarah? Okay, then we will move on to agenda item number 17. discussion and possible action regarding future priorities of or activities of the board. Is there anybody who would like to suggest future priorities or activities for the board? Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 18, announcements and comments not requiring board action. Are there any announcements? Okay, before we adjourn, I would actually like to open the floor for public comment again. And I will just apologize. I meant to, in the middle of our conversation about all those rule changes, also open the floor for public comment, and it completely slipped my mind. So, so I guess let's open the floor again for public comment, and y'all can maybe also comment on whether you like having multiple comment opportunities.
So it's down from about 30 attendees when we began the meeting. We're down to 5. If you'd like to make comment, please raise your hand. I see no hands raised. So I believe that would end the second period of public comment.
Okay.
So the lesson is, if we offer public comment at the beginning, they say what they want to say and leave.
And they leave. Well, I have to say, I'm impressed that we had 30 people. Even like, I honestly just assumed that we still only had 5 people. So I'm actually thrilled that there were 30 people who were logged in to begin with. So, okay, well then actually that puts us down to number 19, adjournment. So, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
That was Nicole. That was seconded by Daniel. All those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. Okay, that means that we are adjourned at 3:01 p.m. Y'all have a great rest of your Friday. Stay safe.
Take care. Thank you.